So guys, today's discussion will focus on what are the various forms of trade protection that are out there. Okay, guys, so the first thing I want to talk about is a scenario. Let's say if this is my, demand and supply. Okay, let's say this is market for oranges. Okay, and let's say this is my demand and supply of oranges in the domestic market. Okay, so right now let's say price is $5 per kg. Okay, are you all with me? What if I tell you guys this, that the world price is not $5, but the world price is, for example, $10. Okay, now why do we have a world supply curve perfectly elastic? First, I want to explain the idea. World supply curve, what if world supply curve is perfectly elastic? What does perfectly elastic mean? Anyone? Perfectly elastic means that people online, perfectly elastic means, sorry? Perfectly elastic means at that going price, you can sell infinite amount of quantity. If I am a world producer, I can sell any quantity at the going price. A good example of this is that iPhone is right now sold for $1,200, for example. That's the price to the whole world. You buy 5 iPhones, you buy 20 iPhones, you buy 400 iPhones, you buy 4,000 iPhones. The world price is, for example, $1,200. It doesn't change when the quantity goes up. So when you are a producer for the whole world, the world supply curve is perfectly elastic. Now, the world price is $10, guys, and the domestic price is $5. And if you are a producer of oranges, what will you do? Will you sell it to the world at $10 or will you sell it to domestic market at $5? Yes, the world, right? Because you make more money. In fact, what you'll do is this for domestic consumers also, you will say the oranges are for $10. So quantity Q1 will be what you call your domestic demand, and you will sell to the world quantity Q2. Why? Because world price is $10, you will sell to the world Q2 quantity. So domestic supply will be Q2. Therefore, what is this gap going to be, guys? What is Q2 minus Q1 will be the difference between domestic supply and domestic demand? Sorry? You're right. Sorry? Surplus, which is who will buy that surplus? We're not buying that surplus. We only can afford Q1 quantity. Domestic demand is only Q1. So Pakistani producer is selling Q1 in the domestic market, but he's producing Q2. Why is he producing Q2? Because the world is offering him a better price. So what is Q2 minus Q1? Exports. Who said that? Good job. Q2 minus Q1 is your level of exports. Does that make sense? If suddenly the world is giving you a better price, you will basically produce more. You will only sell Q1 to the domestic market, and therefore Q2 minus Q1 is your level of export. So let me explain this one more time, Abhiyag. So let's say demand and supply, market price is P0 in the domestic market. Okay, let's call it P0. The market price is $5. So the world price, in this case, guys, the world price is greater than your domestic price. Okay, so world price is like $10 and domestic price is $5. So basically, producer will be like, why should I sell my good for $5 when I can sell it for $10? So he will increase his price from 5 to 10, and he will then produce Q2 quantity. But when you make the price go up to $10, only Q1 domestic consumers are able to afford this good. Are you all with me? Q1 is the domestic demand. Why? Because at $10, only Q1 domestic consumers are buying this good. But the world is happy to buy Q2 minus Q1, and therefore he will export the Q2 minus Q1 quantity. Make sense? So whenever the world price is more than domestic price, you become an exporter. Why? Because the world is giving you a better price, so you will sell it to the world, and domestic consumers lose out because they will now have to pay a higher price. How many consumers are denied of the good because it's become expensive? How many consumers are denied of this good, guys? Q0 minus Q1. Very good job. Q0 minus Q1, who are getting the good, but now they can't because, and it's actually a true story about Pakistani mangoes. You know, if you look at Pakistani mangoes, they are exported. The better quality mangoes don't even come to Pakistani market. And if they do come to Pakistani market, they're sold at the same price as probably the world price, barring the transportation cost. Minus the transportation cost, whatever the price of mangoes is, those high quality mangoes are actually sold for that price, and people are willing to pay that price. Why? During COVID, the export market got affected a lot, and a lot of those mangoes came to Pakistan. I remember a good packaging of mangoes were coming to online because they were not able to sell it abroad, so they were then selling it to domestic market. Of course, the price was lower, but it was still higher than open market. You know, when you go to small store and buy mangoes. Make sense? So now let's look at what is the case. What about the case of what if the world price is? What if the world price is less than domestic price? What happens then if the world price is less than domestic price? If the world price is less than domestic price, guys, then your domestic producers are more expensive. Isn't that true? So that would mean people will be like, why should we buy from domestic producers when the international Chinese producer is giving us at a lower price? So let's say the price is $10, but the domestic producer is selling to the whole world the same good at $5. So this is my world supply. If the world supply is $5, then this is the domestic demand. It previously was Q0, P0, and this is my domestic. So Q2 is my domestic demand. Q1 is my domestic supply. Why? Because these many producers are unable to match the world price. Only 0 to Q0 is the domestic supply. Why? Because after $5, you can't match the $5 price. All these guys who were previously selling for $10, these Q0 minus Q1 producers, they can't sell at that price. Why can't they sell at that price? Why can't they sell at $5? You have to be louder. They will sell it at a loss, which means what is high? What their cost is high. Isn't that true? Isn't supply curve your marginal cost curve? Remember, supply curve was your margin. So this cost is higher. They can't match this. Only these guys are able to match $5 price. Yeah, cost of production is too high. So exactly. So you are not unable to sell at $5, and that's why the domestic. So guys, what is the level of imports now? Q2 minus Q1 is my shabash level of imports. So this is my level of imports. Why? Because the domestic price is higher than the world price, and that's why producers are able to. There will be imports happening, which is going to be good for consumers. If I ask you guys, what's the consumer surplus before versus after? Answer would be consumer surplus before it was A, B, X. Isn't that true? When the price was $10, consumer surplus is area under the demand curve over the market price. Consumer surplus was ABX. After international trade, what is the consumer surplus? And the answer will be A, C, Y, which means all this is the gain in consumer surplus. So consumer surplus or change in consumer surplus is equal to XBCY. Consumers are benefiting Y because the price has gone down. So consumer surplus has gone up. It's a great situation for consumers. Who loses out when you import? which producers are losing out? Domestic producers are losing out. Who are those domestic producers who are losing out? Who are the domestic producers who are losing out? From the diagram, what was the domestic sale before imports? Q0. What's the domestic sale now? Q1. So Q0 minus Q1 domestic producers are losing out. They can't sell anymore, and that's why they're losing out. Isn't that true? Yeah. Why would government, Madhya, you said government will lose out. Why would government lose out? Government doesn't have anything. Government will be happy because consumer surplus is going up. Maybe government may be unhappy if the level of imports is causing unemployment to cause in the domestic market. Yes. Or if it's dumping that is making this level of import to happen. You know, like if that's the cause. But from an economic perspective, guys, if you look at it from an economist perspective, you shouldn't worry about imports to happen. Does that make sense? Why? Why would economists, who is a hardcore economist, would not worry about this? Because he'll be like, yeah, domestic producers are not efficient to begin with, and consumers are better off. Consumer surplus is going up, and we should focus on the goods that we are probably have a competitive advantage. He would say to you, you know, like if you come to me and say, sir, you know, I play football really well, but I struggle in cricket, but I really want to serve, and I'm already a football team member, but I also want to be a cricket team member, but I'm struggling in it. What should I do? Should I work hard in cricket? My advice would be what? Focus on football. You're already in a football team. Why don't you become the best striker in the football team and blah, blah, blah? Why do you want to play two sports and spend too much time and then not be able to make it to the team? So that's what the economists would say. Why do you want to focus on a good way you're not good at? If you want to make cars and you're not good at that, then you should not be focusing because you're wasting resources. Yeah, exactly. Money could have been used elsewhere. The resources could have been used elsewhere. So from an economist perspective, guys, trade is good. Now, let's say government says, now let's look at now our perspective. Let's say government says we want to reduce imports. Okay. So government says this, we want to reduce import, and they decide to put what we call the first method, which is called tariff. Okay. What is a tariff? Tariff is a tax, which is basically on imports. It's a tax on imports, and it results in the price of the good to increase for imported goods. There's a lag happening. Yes, I am writing, but it's not showing. Don't worry, it's going to show in like a few minutes. So tariff is a tax on imported goods, and it results in price of the good to go up. Does that make sense? I'm going to show you now this in terms of a diagram, but I need to have quicker screen sharing happening. So let me try to share my screen one more time, guys. Okay, so guys, how do we show a tariff diagram? So let's draw a tariff diagram. A tariff will be put in a case where a country is exporting or importing too much, right? So let's say this is my demand and supply. Okay, and currently the world price is a domestic price is $10, and the quantity is Q0. And let's say currently the level of imports is, this is world price, which is $5, and the level of imports is Q2 minus Q1, right? And this is my world supply. Okay. Now government decides to put a tariff because government is saying, hey, this level of imports is too much. Okay. So they are unhappy with the level of imports. And let's say they decide to put a tariff of $2. Okay. The tariff is now $2. When they put a tariff of $2, the price becomes from 5, it becomes PW plus T or $7. Are you all with me? So this is world supply plus tariff. Are you all with me? Does that make sense? Now, what is happening here as a result of this, guys? When you make the price to become $7, suddenly the level of domestic sort of demand goes to Q4, and domestic supply goes to Q3. So what you look at it, when you look at this diagram, guys, Q2 is your domestic demand. Q1 is your domestic supply. And Q2 minus Q1 is your imports. This was before tariff. You all agree with me? Does that make sense? Before tariff, I'm going to move this a little bit on that side. Let me move this here. So before tariff, your domestic demand is Q2, domestic supply is Q1, and Q2 minus Q1 is the level of imports. And if I ask you, what's your consumer surplus? You'll say A, let's call this B, C. Consumer surplus is going to be A, B, C. It's an important thing to understand. The consumer surplus is going up before tariff. Things were very good because consumers were happy getting the good for $5, and therefore consumer surplus was going up significantly from this situation to this situation. But when you put tariff, let me write after tariff. Guys, after tariff, if I ask you guys, what's the consumer surplus? First, what's the domestic demand? What's the domestic demand? Domestic demand is going to be Q4. Domestic supply, good job. Domestic supply is going to be Q3. What's your level of imports? Level of imports will be Q4 minus Q3, which means it's gone down, right? It's gone down. Why? Because only Q4 consumers are buying the good, and only Q3, and now more domestic production has happened. So guys, if I ask you from the diagram, what's happening to my consumer surplus? What's my new consumer surplus? And the answer will be, my new consumer surplus will be A, X, Y, which means this region, plus this region, plus these two regions in yellow are my loss of consumer surplus. My consumer surplus is going to be A, let me change the pen, it's going to be A, XY, or area 1, 2, 3, 4. Consumer surplus or change in consumer surplus will be 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. Isn't that true, guys? Consumer surplus is going to fall by 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. Are you all with me? So when you put a tariff, you basically lower the level of imports. Okay. Who are the parties that will be happy with this situation? If I ask you, will the domestic consumer be happy? No. Why? Because he's paying $2 extra. His consumer surplus has gone down. Will the domestic producer be happy? Yes. Why? Because he's now selling more. How much more? What's the domestic supply before? Q1. What's the domestic supply now? Q3. What's the increase in sales? Q3 minus Q1. So domestic producer will be happy because he was not able to match 7. He's now able to match, he was not able to match 5. He's able to match 7. So Q3 minus Q1 is the gain in domestic production. Yes, Madhya, save your thought about the producer surplus. I'm going to talk about this in 1 minute. And who gets the tariff money? The government will also be happy. So let's see how this works. So guys, what is area 1? Area 1 basically, if you look at it, if I ask you guys, what's the producer surplus before? When the price was $5, producer surplus is area under the market price above the supply curve, which means producer surplus was this area. When the price was $5, producer surplus was this area. Domestic producers were Q1, they were pocketing this much. Now the price is $7. So this is the gain in producer surplus. Who is gaining area 1? Then the answer is gain in domestic producer surplus, which is Q3 minus Q1. Are you all with me? This Q3 minus Q1 guys are selling more, which means area 1 is pocketed by them. Are these efficient producers, guys, or inefficient producers? Inefficient. Why? Because the world can sell it for 5 and they're selling for 7. The only reason why they were able to sell is why? Because of tariff. Who said that? Good job. Because of tariff. If there was no tariff, they would not have been able to sell this good. Thanks to tariff, they came back to the market. Otherwise, they were out of market. What is area 3? Area 3, we say, is your tariff revenue. Why? Because look at this, guys. The vertical distance is $2. This vertical distance, remember, if you look at this is $2. And the quantity sold is Q4 minus Q3. So tariff revenue will be T times Q4 minus Q3. And that goes to the government. The government will pocket this area 3. This area 3 is what the government is going to pocket. Why? Because now every import will give them $2 in their pocket. Make sense? So area 2 is what we call government surplus. So the parties that are benefiting are domestic producers and the government in terms of tariff revenue. To 10, then basically this becomes everything will be sold by domestic consumer producers. Import will go down to 0 because domestic demand will be equal to domestic supply. If you make the tariff to be $5, then they say basically this is going to make everything, then you basically have matched the domestic price. So nobody is going to be selling, no import will happen. Make sense? We won't even export because our price is $10 and the world is selling for 5. We're basically only going to be selling at domestic market. This has happened in Pakistan where they made the price, imported price to be so high that there's no point of buying imported cars, for example. We keep on putting, by the way, taxes on import cars because we want to sort of discourage the consumption of these cars. Very good, Madhya. What is area 2? Area 2, guys, we call it a dead weight or loss or social welfare loss. Because this is a loss that is taking place. Why? Because when I say deadweight loss, this means this area 2 is not going to any party. And why do we have this loss? Because we have as Q3 minus Q1 inefficient inefficient producers are producing more. Are you all with me? Because Q3 minus Q1 are the inefficient producers, they are producing more. We have ended up with a situation that area 2 is not going to any party, right? Have a guess about area 4. Can somebody tell me what is area 4 going to be? It's also a deadweight loss. Why is area 4 happening? Very good. Consumers are exactly because Q2 minus Q4 consumers are denied of the good. So area, I have lack of space, but I want to write this here. Area 4 is your deadweight loss as Q2 minus Q4 consumers are denied of the good. And why are they denied of the good? Because you made it expensive. Madhya, sir, I was saying because of tariff, the imports will no longer be needed. No, because of tariffs, the imports are gone down to Q3, Q4 minus Q3. But because you are now importing less, you are promoting the inefficient domestic producers. Now, guys, from an economic perspective, if you look at tariffs, tariffs are discouraged from an economic perspective because of many reasons. Number one, consumers are denied of the good. Some consumers are denied of the good. Number two, inefficient producers are producing more. Number three, government can make money. It's okay. It will hopefully not use it for bad purposes. But number three is deadweight losses that happen that doesn't go to anyone. Neither that area 2 and area 4 are what we call social welfare loss. It could have been somebody's consumer surplus, but because you made the good expensive, you've ended up some consumers to be denied of the good and some producers who are inefficient to begin with to produce more. Got it? So that's the story of a tariff. A tariff results in social welfare loss of area 2 and 4. Area 1 is basically gain of domestic producers, and area 3 is government tax revenue. Make sense, guys? So excess goods are in area 2 are a surplus. Area 2 are basically the loss of efficiency because domestic producers are producing more. This area, this Q3 minus Q1 is sold to a domestic market now. It's not excess, but it's sold at a higher price, which is a problem. Make sense, guys? Any questions? Okay, I'm going to wrap this up and I'm going to tomorrow do a quick recap of this, and then we'll discuss quota tomorrow, the second types of protection. Okay, bye bye, guys.